Hello, hello, hello. We're turning up. Day 4. So yeah, I'm currently 15 steps out of 176. On the first of the JavaScript development and JavaScript. What's the course again? JavaScript algorithms and data structures course on Free Code Camp. We're turning up. We're turning up. So let's dive in. Let's resume the project. Step 16. Now you can start writing your JavaScript. Begin by creating a script element. Element is used to load. Change the file using open script to the closing tag. Okay. So this was what I did the first time round. Um, so with HTML, you can insert a JavaScript file using this tag, and then it then knows to the browser then knows to read this as JavaScript. Cool. And this is what I was saying yesterday about not being too overwhelmed by the number. I mean, this is one step, introducing those tags. Now, fair enough, I already know it. So I already know some JavaScript, so I know what it's talking about. But this would have been maybe 5 minutes of, as we've demonstrated, going to MDN docs or going to W3 schools and looking at a JavaScript, their JavaScript element in HTML. And, it's really not, that's one step. That's 5 minutes. So it is 176, and that's just one project out of I think 4, and then your certifications. But it's manageable. It's the point I'm making. It's manageable. So cool. Let's submit and go to the next. One of the most powerful tools is the console. 12 ships out on Mac. We can also use the CI. Cool. So these are just some basics on JavaScript, and I love that the classic Hello World. Any sort of programming course you might do, your first program is always Hello World. It's sort of a tradition, I guess. And so I love that that's part of it here. But yeah, the browser treats whatever's between the tags as it reads it as JavaScript code, so we can then use it to interact directly. So we have the console here, and this will exist in terminals. It will exist in VS Code. I think most things will have a terminal, as it's suggested. So let's go. One thing I learned, or not learned, one thing I read once was when you're learning some of these things, it's useful to sort of deviate from the instructions being given. Now, I can't quite do that here because, for instance, if I was to type in, you know, and the reason you deviate is because it allows you to start exploring. It allows you to engage more with what you're doing because you're not just copying and pasting. But if I do that here, it will fail. Um, it will fail the code. So I do have to do it specifically, but that's something to bear in mind when you're. And I guess this course allows you to do that with the certification project because it gives you a lot less um, instruction and allows for you to do it yourself. I mean, I say that I've only heard them talk about it in that YouTube video that I showed in the first of these sort of turn ups. So, yeah, um, it's worth doing that. But yeah, it's also worth checking stuff. Now, here's a rare insight into the life of a married streamer, if I can call myself that after 4 days of streaming. But my wife has made a request of me, therefore, I'm going to have to leave you guys for 2 seconds and head back. And as I said last time, I can't quite pause this and I don't want to end the stream and restart it. So give me two. And we're back. Again, apologies. Um, for whoever watches this whenever you do, because no one's watching right now. But anyway, yeah, let's make sure we pass this test, and then we can start deviating later on in life. Cool. Cool. So, um, this is sort of, I guess, starting to learn how to structure some of these projects or structure some of these websites. So we'd want to keep our JavaScript in a separate file, and that way, it's not just plain JavaScript in the in the DOM, I believe it will be called. Now, with that said, I know that when it says attribute, it's talking about this elements that go within the tag, and that are then sort of code that the browser's then able to, that the various elements allow you to configure them with. So by saying source, and actually I am not entirely sure this is the format for it, but let's see. So because it said attribute, I know it should go in the tag, but and this is again, all you do as a programmer is, so let's say source attribute in HTML, and I'm going to say script tag. And for consistency, let's stick with W3 Schools and MDN. But yeah, so it's source in quotation marks this would be the address of the file. So I believe this should pass. Yeah. Okay. So they've introduced another file here, scripts.js, and that's what the index.html or HTML file will then be referencing. So a script will normally be near the top in the head. Okay, so it's one of those elements that go in the head, and they've reformatted it nicely to sit right here and go into there. So cool. I'm just gonna stick my console log here, and again I'm gonna show my console, and hello world is right there. Cool. Let's start writing some project code. Now in JavaScript, a variable is used to hold a value. To use a variable, you must first declare it. For the variable code comport, you would write that So this is quite cool. This is us starting to learn the basics of JavaScript. So here I'm declaring the variable xp. Now it's worth knowing declaring a variable is, if I remember correctly, assigning memory to that, and so it's telling the program to allocate some memory to this particular and name this allocation of memory, in this case xp. Um, Now, variable is one type, and I'm sure we'll go on to this, but you can also have like characters, strings, all of these being data types, which I'm sure we'll get to. But the various data types just require different allocations of memory and are then allowed to do different things. And so that's what we're doing when we declare a variable, I believe. All right. Okay, so it's initialization to assign a value to a variable at the point of declaring it. So actually, I also would want to start taking notes, and I need to think a little bit about how I do that, because I want this to be super useful. Um, so I'm going to take notes on the side in sort of my own tool that I tend to use. And I'm going to not so much share that, because I might want to do a separate video on this later on in life about sort of my tool set as and when, you know, YouTube starts popping off. And so I'll save it for that, where I can go into a bit more detail. But I'm gonna start using it now because I think this will be useful. So I have a like a notebook, as it were, for coding. I've got my JavaScript course in there. I'm gonna create a new course. Well, under my JavaScript stuff, I'm gonna create a course. I'm gonna create a new note um for this, for learning JavaScript with Free Code Camp. And the reason I like using Remnote is because it allows me to create flashcards as I go, and I like using those flashcards to revise information that I've learned. So cool. Interestingly, so this I'd get excuse me. This I get away with because it's a number. As you can see, where the variable camperbot is initialized to bot, this is a string, and it's in quotation marks. Um, as an XP, we know it's a number, so we can assign it with just 0 on its own. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so we've got health. Um, for health equals 100. Oh, and it is case sensitive as well, which is interesting. Well, gold equals 50. And again, I guess sort of looking at the way these things are structured, I can see we're creating these variables here, but they quite clearly correlate to the HTML elements for XP, health, and gold that we put, and actually we're matching the numbers as well. So this is where I guess we start to tie in, or not start to tie in, but even in our design of our JavaScript, we're starting to tie it into what's going on in the HTML file. Can't weapon set to 0. Camel case being the way, the convention that we use to sort of write stuff that's multiple words in JavaScript. Nice. I love the way that this is teaching us how to do it. I've only added an extra line in between there because in my head it makes sense to group these because they're grouped here, and to start sort of grouping things elsewhere as well. Now that might not be useful at all, and they've edited it out, they formatted it out, but I don't know, it makes sense in my head as well. Okay. This is interesting. They don't quite explain why, so it's worth us looking into. Again, I'd always say, W3 schools, MD, and webs are quickly becoming my favorites. I guess it would be cool to see what the undesirable behavior is of the var declaration, but alas, I'm sure we'll learn that when we go. I think there is a way to do sort of multiple cursor stuff in, I know at least of VS Code. I'm sure there might be ways elsewhere. There might even be ways here, but yeah. Okay. So we can create a variable fighting without initializing it. Okay. So this is what I was talking about in terms of types, and in as much as we use let, when we assign sort of a string to a variable, it becomes, actually let me not say that. I don't know if it really becomes it becomes a string variable, but it definitely, I know, yeah, that in doing so it gains different demeanor, at the very least, different format, as it were. Hello, Emmy says. I'm not going to make the same mistake of saying it's Robert or Drea, but to the lovely Emmy says, thank you for joining me. So you can tell I am a bit tired, but we're turning up. We are turning up, and we'll stay consistent no matter what. So let's see if that passes, and it does. So this is good. Player's inventory in your game will be able to hold multiple items. You will need to use a data type that can do this. An array can be used to hold multiple items. This is an array that holds 3. It's an array, 3 strings. So yeah, this again really cool. That we're learning to do these things in this way. So thus far we've been assigning sort of single items to the various variables. We've been assigning numbers to this. We assigned a string to an inventory, which would make it sort of a string variable. But what we're suggesting here is that's actually not a useful data type for what we want to do, because your inventory, if you're thinking about, oh, yo, it's OD. Shout out to Nat. Thank you for joining. Oh, that's giving me energy. I was tired, but that's giving me energy. That's good to see you guys. Good to see you. Thank you. Anyway, yeah. So, yeah, a singular stick in an inventory. Well, that's a pretty shallow inventory. And if it's just a string variable, then all I can do is change the letters, as it were, change the strings, change the string that is a variable. But an array allows us to hold multiple things. So an array is almost like a filing cabinet. And I say that because I know we can then start to access various things within the array, because we can access the first one and the second one, the third one, and do specific things to it. We can also do specific things with arrays, with methods and stuff, but I'm sure we'll get there. So at this present point, they want us to change our variable from a string to an array. And if we look here, we can see that it's set up with a slightly different syntax. I know these square brackets are what effectively makes it an array. So let's introduce those square brackets. So now we have an array effectively with one element, but we're going to add 2 more, which is a dagger and a sword. And you can see my highlighting. And so this sort of syntax highlighting is also quite useful, because it helps to highlight issues before they become too crazy. And then, as much as we are dealing with an array can then hold different data types within it. But just saying dagger or just saying sword on its own, well, almost presents the idea of these being variables on their own, because we haven't told the program what they are. And so I want to, as is demonstrated here, I want to say, well, these are also strings. So we have an array of strings, and I have defined correctly every element within the array. So this should pass. Okay. So they want me to change this to have just a stick as its only array. As the only item in the array. Cool. Alright, so we're starting to get a little bit more technical. JavaScript interacts with the HTML using the document object model. So that's the DOM that I referred to. And the DOM is a tree of objects that represents the HTML. and you can access the HTML using the document object, which represents your entire HTML document. This is cool. I love this. I love the way it's presenting this. So everything that we've done thus far in the HTML has been defining the various objects within the page, within the browser. So that's effectively what this is. And so you've got your buttons, you've got some text, your background, your padding. All of these things are defining various objects within the browser, effectively. What this concept is suggesting is that um, those objects are then represented or accessible as is considered a singular object, which is the document. And so this document object represents everything within the browser, within the HTML that we've been doing. But then that's also what's then called the document object model, which is this idea of making this entire thing its own object that we can then interact with. So when we then say the document, when we use document, we will then be referring to all of this, and then we can look at document and do something specific to a button, or document and do something specific when someone hovers over a button or start changing that behavior. So that's cool. I love that. That's been suggested. I'm going to make a note of this, so I'm not wasting too much time as we go. Yeah. Cool. Now, one method for finding specific elements in your HTML is using the query selector, which takes a CSS selector as an argument and returns the first element that matches. Okay, cool. So the CSS selectors are effectively those CSS bits that we were introducing. So hashtag game is a CSS selector that refers to anything with an ID of game. And we know that we have elements with IDs. We've got this div. And so to sort of access it with JavaScript, I'll be saying to JavaScript all right, we're going to do something with the document, which is everything here. But now we're going to use this specific method called query selector to then drill down to the specific thing that we want. So if it's an ID of game, we're going to tell JavaScript, you're going to go and do something to this within the document, this element that has an ID of game, which we have here. So that's cool. Okay. All right. So I lost myself a little bit there, and this might be a sign of the times that I'm getting tired. But create a button1 variable and use query selector to assign it your element with the ID of button1. Okay, cool. So let's break this down. We've got a variable called button1. Right. Now actually, because thus far we've shied away from using var, I'm gonna go back and make this let. So let button1. Okay. That's that first part. We're going to assign it this element that we're going to grab, as it were, with query selector. So we're then going to say let button1. So at this point we're initializing it, but we're declaring button1 is going to exist as a variable within the JavaScript file. And we're saying let button1. We're going to assign it to this item. Now we're going to use the query selector to say, we understand that query selector will take a CS selector as an argument, and what all that means is that this method within the brackets, we can put something in here, and it will then use whatever we put in there to do something. So we are then saying assign it the element with the ID of button 1. Now I don't even need to go into my styles because it's saying it to me. So we're saying, and I can see here that they've put the CSS selector in quotation marks. So that's what I'm going to do. We want within the document something, or the first thing that has a CSS selector of an ID that is button 1, which is effectively, because it's an ID, it's a hashtag. Sorry. And then the ID, which is, hashtag button 1. So what I've now done is I have said go through, let me close this off with a semicolon. I have said go through and find the element that has an ID of button 1. And I'll grab that, I believe that's this one, and then assign it to this variable, which then becomes, I guess, an object element or an object variable, something along those lines. So let's see if this worked, and it did, which is good. Cool. And I think 30 is going to be a good place for me to take a break, because I am starting to feel myself slip. So submit and go to the next. And I'm going to come back at this tomorrow, because it's been 30 minutes, and that's what today I think my head will work with. Even though I could probably go a bit longer, I think I'm a bit tired, so I'm gonna hit the hay, as it were. So thank you for joining me. It's so cool. Thank you, Mrs. The support, the love is real, and I appreciate it. And OD, man, you made my evening coming through. So thank you guys for joining, and whoever watches this, whenever you do, I hope that you get something from it. And when I go back and watch this, I hope that I am in a place where I can say I have improved at the very least. That comment makes me think it's Robert. Well, cool. All right, guys, we turned up. Have a good evening. Peace.